Sometimes the hardest battle isn't against the world, it's against the silence inside you. You watch people fall in love. You watch promises being made, hands being held, futures being planned. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet question keeps returning. Why not me? If you can't find true love, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're unworthy. And it definitely doesn't mean you're meant to be alone. It means you're being shaped, because real love doesn't arrive when we're desperate for it. It arrives when we've survived disappointment without losing our humanity, when we've been rejected but didn't turn bitter, when we've been alone and learned how to stand. This isn't a speech about waiting endlessly. It's about overcoming the loneliness without letting it harden you. It's about becoming so complete within yourself that love doesn't save you. It meets you. If you've ever felt invisible in love, if you've ever questioned your worth because someone couldn't see it, then this message is for you, because not finding true love yet is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your strength. I can't find true love. Those words don't come out loud most of the time. They stay inside. They sit quietly behind the ribs, heavy but familiar, like a weight you've learned to carry without showing the strain. You don't say it because people rush to fix it. They tell you to wait. They tell you love comes when you stop looking. They tell you it will happen when the time is right. And none of those answers touch the real ache, because the ache isn't about time. It's about wondering if there's something in you that keeps being missed. You replay conversations in your head. You think about the people who came close but never stayed, the ones who promised something more and then slowly pulled away, the ones who chose someone else. And after a while, the question changes. It stops being, when will I find love? And becomes, what is it about me that isn't enough to make someone stay? That question can break a person if they let it. It can turn confidence into doubt, softness into armor, hope into something you're embarrassed to still have. You start watching yourself more carefully. You wonder if you talk too much or feel too deeply. You wonder if you should be less available, less kind, less real. You start editing yourself in your own life, cutting away the parts you think are the problem. But not finding true love isn't proof that you're unlovable. It's proof that you're still intact in a world that often rewards people for being shallow, rushed, or emotionally unavailable. It means you haven't learned how to pretend yet. It means you still feel things fully, even when it hurts. And that kind of depth doesn't always find a match quickly, because depth scares people who haven't met themselves yet. Loneliness doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in. It shows up on quiet nights when your phone doesn't light up. It shows up when you see couples doing ordinary things together and realize how extraordinary that kind of consistency feels to you. It shows up when you have something good or something painful to share and there's no one who really knows you well enough to understand why it matters. And you try to be strong about it. You tell yourself you're fine. You tell yourself you don't need anyone. You build a life that works on the surface. You keep moving forward. But strength doesn't erase the need to be seen. Independence doesn't cancel the desire to be chosen. And pretending you don't care doesn't make the quiet moments any less loud. There's a kind of courage in staying open when love hasn't been kind to you. It would be easier to shut down, easier to stop believing, easier to decide that love is overrated and attachment is weakness. But some people don't know how to live that way. They feel too much. They notice too much. They still believe even when experience tells them to be careful. And maybe that's the point no one talks about. Maybe the reason you haven't found true love isn't because you're late or broken, but because you're becoming someone who won't settle for something that only looks like love. Because you've already felt what it's like to be halfway chosen, to be almost loved, to be someone's option instead of their decision. Those experiences leave marks. They teach you restraint. They teach you patience. They teach you how to sit with disappointment without letting it turn into cruelty. They teach you how to walk away from what feels good but isn't right. And none of that feels heroic while it's happening. It just feels lonely. You start learning yourself in ways you never would have if love had come easily. You learn how your mind works in silence. You learn what comforts you when no one else is there. You learn what kind of presence you want because you've lived without it. You learn how much you can give, and where giving too much starts to cost you your peace. There's a quiet dignity in surviving nights where you wish someone was there to hold you, and waking up the next day still willing to try again, still kind, still hopeful, still capable of caring. That doesn't make you weak, that makes you resilient in a way most people never have to be. Not finding true love forces you to confront yourself honestly. You can't hide behind someone else's affection. You can't measure your worth by being wanted. You have to decide who you are when no one is choosing you, applauding you, or promising you forever. And that decision shapes you in ways comfort never could. You begin to understand that love isn't just about being found, it's about being ready to be met. And readiness isn't about perfection. It's about knowing yourself well enough to recognize what is real when it appears. It's about not confusing attention with connection. It's about not mistaking intensity for intimacy. The world is full of noise. People rush into relationships to avoid being alone. They fill space instead of building something meaningful. And from the outside, it looks like they've figured something out that you haven't. But you don't see the compromises. You don't see the quiet dissatisfaction. You don't see the parts of themselves they had to abandon just to keep someone from leaving. You, on the other hand, are still whole, even if you feel tired, even if you feel overlooked, even if some nights the weight of it all sits heavy on your chest. You haven't given up your ability to feel deeply. You haven't traded your authenticity for comfort. You haven't learned how to pretend you don't care when you do, and that matters more than you think. Because true love doesn't recognize masks. It recognizes truth. It recognizes the person who stayed soft in a hard world, the person who didn't let rejection turn into bitterness, the person who learned to stand alone without becoming closed off, the person who understands solitude not as punishment, but as preparation. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not missing some secret everyone else figured out. You're just walking a path that demands more patience, more self-awareness, more courage than most people ever have to develop. And that path is lonely, but it's honest. Every disappointment you survived refined you. Every almost relationship clarified what you won't accept again. Every quiet season strengthened parts of you that won't collapse when love finally arrives. You didn't waste time. You were building a foundation. And one day, when love does show up in a form that doesn't confuse you, doesn't exhaust you, doesn't make you question your worth, you'll understand why nothing before it could stay. You'll recognize the difference immediately, not because it's louder or more dramatic, but because it's calm, because it doesn't make you perform, because it doesn't ask you to shrink or prove or chase. Until then, the loneliness will still visit sometimes. It will still sit beside you on quiet evenings. It will still whisper doubts when you see what you think you're missing. But it won't define you. It won't own you, because you'll know that not finding true love yet is not evidence of failure, but evidence that you are still becoming someone who will recognize it when it finally stands in front of you. Loneliness teaches you what love never could. That idea sounds harsh at first, almost unfair, especially to someone who has spent so much time wanting love, waiting for it, hoping for it. Loneliness feels like something to escape, not something to learn from. It feels like an absence, like proof that something is missing, but absence has a way of revealing truths that comfort never touches. When you're alone, there's no distraction strong enough to hide you from yourself. No one else's presence to lean on, no borrowed identity, no reflected sense of worth coming from being wanted. There's just you, your thoughts, your patterns, your fears, and the quiet question of who you are when no one is choosing you. At first, loneliness feels like rejection. You assume it means you weren't enough, that if you were better, smarter, more attractive, more interesting, someone would have stayed. You replay moments in your head, searching for the mistake that explains everything. You believe loneliness is punishment for something you failed to do right, but over time, loneliness changes its voice. It stops accusing and starts revealing. It shows you how much of yourself you used to give away just to feel connected, how often you adjusted your behavior to match someone else's expectations, how easily you confused being needed with being loved. When love comes early or easily, it can hide those truths. It can make you feel complete before you've ever learned who you are. It can distract you from your wounds instead of healing them. Loneliness doesn't allow that escape. It forces you to sit with what hurts instead of covering it up. You start noticing patterns, the kinds of people you're drawn to, the roles you naturally fall into, the ways you try to earn affection instead of receiving it freely. You see how often you prioritized harmony over honesty, connection over self-respect, being liked over being understood. Loneliness teaches you patience, not because you want to be patient, but because there's no other choice. You learn how to endure silence without filling it with noise. You learn how to survive weekends without plans, nights without messages, milestones without someone by your side, and slowly endurance becomes strength. There's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely, and loneliness teaches you that too. Being alone can be peaceful. Loneliness is the ache of wanting to be known. When you feel that ache long enough, you stop trying to numb it. You stop chasing distractions. You stop forcing connections that don't feel right. You begin to listen. You discover what actually matters to you when no one else is influencing your choices. What calms you, what excites you, what values you refuse to compromise again. Love often asks you to merge. Loneliness asks you to define. In the quiet, you learn the weight of your own emotions. You learn how sadness moves through you, how hope shows up even after disappointment, how resilience builds quietly day by day without applause. You learn that feelings don't destroy you just because they're uncomfortable. Loneliness also strips away illusion. You stop romanticizing people who never showed up fully. You stop excusing behavior that hurt you. You stop pretending potential is the same as reality. When you're alone, there's no one to convince you to ignore what you already know. You learn accountability for your own happiness. Not in a cold, detached way, but in an honest one. You realize no one is coming to save you from your inner world. No relationship can fix what you refuse to face. And that realization, as heavy as it feels, is also freeing. Love can sometimes make you lazy with yourself. It can make you rely on someone else's presence to feel stable. Loneliness demands that you build that stability internally. You learn how to comfort yourself, how to calm your own anxiety, how to sit with uncertainty without falling apart. You become more selective, not because you're closed off, but because you understand the cost of letting the wrong person in. Loneliness shows you how much peace matters, how sacred your energy is, how disruptive inconsistency feels once you've tasted calm. There's a strength that comes from knowing you can survive on your own, not just survive, but live with intention. You stop panicking at the idea of being alone forever. You stop rushing connections just to avoid the silence. You start trusting timing instead of forcing outcomes. Loneliness teaches you empathy. You become gentler with others because you understand invisible struggles. You stop judging people for their quietness, their guardedness, their hesitation. You recognize pain that isn't announced. Love doesn't always deepen empathy. Loneliness often does. It also teaches you boundaries. You realize that just because someone wants access to you doesn't mean they deserve it. You understand the difference between company and companionship. You stop confusing attention with care. You stop offering emotional labor to people who haven't earned trust. Loneliness sharpens your awareness. You notice red flags sooner. You listen to your intuition instead of overriding it. You trust discomfort as information, not weakness. Love sometimes convinces you to ignore those signals in the name of connection. There are nights when loneliness feels unbearable, when the quiet presses in too close, when you wish someone would reach out without being asked. Those nights teach you humility. They remind you that wanting love is human, not shameful, that independence doesn't erase the need for connection. But those same nights also teach you self-compassion. You learn to speak to yourself kindly instead of critically. You learn to forgive yourself for past choices made out of fear. You learn to grieve what didn't happen without turning that grief into self-blame. Loneliness teaches you to slow down, to stop measuring your life against someone else's timeline, to stop assuming you're behind because your path looks different. Love often distracts you from comparison. Loneliness confronts it and forces you to let it go. You begin to understand that being alone is not the same as being unwanted, that some of the most meaningful growth happens in seasons no one applauds, that becoming whole takes time and time spent alone is not wasted time. By the time love finally appears, loneliness has already prepared you. It has taught you what you will no longer tolerate, what you truly value, what kind of presence feels safe, what kind of absence you refuse to relive. Love may bring warmth, but loneliness brought clarity. Love may bring companionship, but loneliness built strength. Love may bring joy, but loneliness taught you how to stand when joy isn't available. And once you've learned those lessons, you no longer fear being alone. You respect it. You understand it. You know it shaped you into someone who can love without losing themselves, who can connect without clinging, who can choose without desperation. True love begins when you stop begging to be chosen. Most people don't realize how early the begging starts. It doesn't begin with desperation. It begins with hope, with the quiet belief that if you show enough care, enough patience, enough understanding, someone will eventually see you the way you want to be seen. You tell yourself love is built, not found. You tell yourself effort matters, and effort does matter, but only when it moves in both directions. Begging hides behind small compromises. You excuse inconsistency. You rationalize distance. You tell yourself people are busy, confused, healing, not ready. You adjust your expectations so they fit the space someone is willing to give you, and every adjustment feels reasonable on its own until you look back and realize how much of yourself you've been slowly folding away. You wait longer than you should. You answer messages that come late and dry. You accept affection without commitment and connection without clarity. You convince yourself that asking for more would make you needy, that wanting consistency would push them away, that speaking honestly would ruin what little you have. And so you stay quiet, hoping effort will speak for you. Begging isn't always about words. Sometimes it's about presence, being there even when you're tired, being understanding even when you're hurt, being available even when you feel invisible. You tell yourself love means sacrifice, but the sacrifice keeps coming from the same place, and it starts to drain you. There's a moment, usually late at night, when the truth slips through, when you realize you're more invested than they are, when you notice how much thought you give to someone who barely considers you, when you feel that familiar ache of waiting for something that may never come. That moment doesn't scream, it just sits there heavy and undeniable. And still, many people stay, not because they're weak, but because they're hopeful. Because walking away feels like giving up, because letting go feels like admitting the connection wasn't real, because starting over feels exhausting. So they bargain with themselves instead. They say, just a little longer, just one more chance, just until things change. But things rarely change when someone knows you will stay regardless. Stopping the begging doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fatigue, from reaching the limit of how much uncertainty you can carry, from realizing that love shouldn't feel like something you have to earn through silence and endurance, from understanding that being chosen shouldn't feel like a favor. There's grief in that realization, grief for the version of yourself who kept believing, who kept waiting, who kept giving. You don't judge that version, you understand them. They wanted love badly and they tried to build it the only way they knew how, but you can't live there forever. The moment you stop begging, you stop negotiating your worth, you stop shrinking your needs to fit someone else's comfort, you stop treating clarity like an unreasonable demand. You start recognizing that confusion is an answer, distance is a message, and inconsistency is a decision. That clarity is painful at first because it forces you to see things as they are, not as you hope they would become. It forces you to accept that effort without reciprocity is self-abandonment, that staying quiet to keep someone close is another way of losing yourself. Walking away doesn't feel empowering in the beginning. It feels empty. It feels like loss. It feels like standing alone with all the feelings you were trying to avoid. but slowly something steadier replaces the anxiety. Peace doesn't rush in, but it shows up in small moments, in not checking your phone as often, in sleeping without waiting for a message, in breathing without feeling like you're about to be left. You begin to notice how much energy begging was taking from you, how much mental space it occupied, how often you were rehearsing conversations, analyzing tone, searching for reassurance. Letting go frees that energy, and for the first time in a long while, it returns to you. You start paying attention to yourself again, what you want, what you feel, what you need, not as something to suppress, but as something to honor. You stop apologizing for wanting real connection. You stop feeling guilty for expecting effort. You stop believing that asking for consistency makes you difficult. True love doesn't require you to disappear. It doesn't ask you to wait in uncertainty. It doesn't punish you for being honest. It doesn't make you feel like you're too much for wanting something solid. When you stop begging, you stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop mistaking attention for care. You stop chasing the highs and lows that keep you emotionally hooked. You learn to value steadiness over excitement, presence over promises, actions over words. That shift changes how you see people. You notice who shows up without being asked, who communicates without being hazed, who makes space for you without making you feel like a burden. And you also notice who only appears when it's convenient, who disappears when things require effort, who enjoys being wanted more than they enjoy wanting you back. And once you see that difference, you can't ignore it. Stopping the begging means accepting that some connections were never meant to deepen, that some people only meet you at the surface, that no amount of patience can turn someone into who they are not ready to be, that love cannot be forced into existence by endurance alone. There's a quiet confidence that grows when you choose yourself consistently. It's not loud or performative. It's not arrogance. It's calm. It's knowing that you'll be okay whether someone stays or leaves. It's trusting that your life doesn't begin or end with someone else's decision. You stop needing to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. You've chosen honesty over attachment. You've chosen dignity over desperation. You've chosen peace over potential. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care wisely. You open your heart without giving access to anyone who hasn't earned trust. You allow connection without sacrificing boundaries. You stay kind without becoming available to inconsistency. True love begins there, not in the chase, not in the waiting, not in the hoping that someone will finally change their mind. It begins in the space where you are whole on your own, where you know your worth without needing validation, where you can walk away without hatred or regret. When love finally meets you there, it won't feel like relief from loneliness. It won't feel like winning a battle. It will feel familiar, steady, unforced. It will feel like being met, not rescued, like being chosen without having to ask, like being valued without having to prove anything. Until then, you don't beg, you don't convince, you don't chase. You live, you grow, you remain open but grounded. You trust that what's meant for you will recognize you without persuasion. And you understand now that love that requires you to lose yourself was never love meant to stay. You don't fail at love. Love tests who you are becoming. Most people grow up believing love is a reward, that if you do enough right things, say the right words, show up at the right time, it will be given to you like confirmation that you're worthy. And when it doesn't arrive, the mind searches for mistakes. It assumes something went wrong, that something about you wasn't correct, polished, impressive, or lovable enough to earn it. But love doesn't work like a prize. It works like a mirror. It reflects back the parts of you that are ready and the parts that still need time. And when love doesn't stay, it isn't always because you failed. Sometimes it's because you weren't meant to stop growing yet. Every disappointment feels personal at first. You internalize it, you replay it, you reduce yourself to the ending and ignore everything that came before. You forget how much you learned, how much you stretched, how much you became during the process of wanting and losing and trying again. Love tests patience, not the passive kind where you wait and hope, but the active kind where you keep living honestly while uncertainty exists. It tests your ability to stay kind without being naive, open without being unprotected, hopeful without being dependent on outcomes you can't control. When love doesn't choose you, it tests your relationship with yourself. Do you collapse inward and decide you're not enough, or do you stay standing and ask what this moment is teaching you about your boundaries, your values, your timing? That question changes everything. There's a version of you that only exists because love didn't work out when you wanted it to. A version that learned restraint instead of obsession. A version that learned clarity instead of fantasy. A version that learned how to listen to silence instead of chasing noise. Those lessons don't feel like gifts while they're forming. They feel like loss. They feel like rejection. They feel like standing still while everyone else moves forward. But growth often looks like stagnation from the outside because the real changes are happening where no one is watching. Love tests whether you can hold on to your identity when attachment threatens to blur it, whether you can remain honest when honesty risks loss, whether you can walk away from what feels good if it isn't aligned with who you are becoming. Many people pass through relationships without ever facing those tests. They stay comfortable, they stay distracted, they stay supported by someone else's presence, and comfort delays growth. It keeps you from asking hard questions. It keeps you from meeting yourself fully. When love doesn't stay, you're forced into that meeting. You're forced to ask what you want beyond companionship, what kind of life you're building, what kind of partner you would be if the right person showed up tomorrow. Those questions don't have quick answers, and they shouldn't. Love tests your integrity. It shows you where you compromise too easily, where you avoid conflict to keep peace, where you silence yourself to avoid abandonment. Those patterns don't appear randomly. They appear when love pressures you, when attachment activates fear, and fear doesn't mean weakness. It means something matters. But how you respond to that fear determines who you become. Do you let it run you, or do you learn from it? Do you give away your power, or do you refine it? There's pain in realizing that love didn't fail you. It exposed you, exposed your need for validation, exposed your tolerance for uncertainty, exposed your habits of self-sacrifice. That exposure is uncomfortable, but it's honest. Love tests whether you believe you deserve consistency, not just intensity, whether you value peace as much as passion, whether you understand that excitement fades, but respect sustains. Those tests arrive quietly, hidden inside everyday moments, inside missed calls, delayed replies, unkept promises. When love leaves, it tests your resilience, not your ability to pretend you're fine, but your ability to stay open without becoming bitter, to grieve without closing off, to heal without rewriting the past into something cruel or meaningless. You learn that heartbreak doesn't destroy you, it rearranges you, it shifts priorities, it sharpens awareness, it forces you to separate what you imagined from what actually was. And that separation, painful as it is, brings clarity. Love tests your patience with timing. It teaches you that wanting something doesn't mean you're ready for it. That needing connection doesn't mean the right connection is available yet. That forcing alignment only creates friction and regret. There's humility in accepting that some lessons take time, that becoming someone capable of real love requires solitude, self-reflection, and restraint, that rushing into the next thing just to fill space only delays growth. Love tests whether you can trust the process without seeing the outcome, whether you can continue becoming without guarantees, whether you can believe that what's being built inside you matters, even if no one else sees it yet. And slowly, without announcement, you begin to change. You react less. You observe more. You speak with intention instead of urgency. You choose depth over drama. You stop romanticizing struggle and start valuing stability. Love tests whether you can let go without rewriting your worth, whether you can release someone without needing to be right or justified, whether you can accept that two people can care and still not be aligned. Those tests are quiet victories. They don't come with applause, but they shape character. They build emotional strength that doesn't depend on external reassurance. They prepare you for a connection that won't ask you to prove yourself. You stop seeing love as something that completes you and start seeing it as something that complements you. You stop expecting it to fix emptiness and start expecting it to share fullness. That shift changes everything. Love tests whether you can hold standards without hardening your heart, whether you can say no without guilt, whether you can walk away from what almost works without clinging to potential. Each failed connection refines those standards, not out of fear, but out of understanding. You know now what it costs to ignore your intuition. You know what it feels like to stay too long. You know the difference between patience and self-neglect. And with that knowledge, you become steadier, less reactive, more intentional. You stop chasing moments and start choosing direction. You stop asking why it didn't work and start asking what it prepared you for. Love tests whether you can remain hopeful without becoming dependent on hope, whether you see and desire connection without making it the center of your identity, whether you can live fully even when something important is missing. That balance is rare, and it's built through disappointment, not success, through endings, not beginnings, through waiting, not arrival. By the time love finally meets you in a way that stays, you will recognize it not by intensity, but by ease, not by urgency, but by steadiness, not by fear of loss, but by absence of doubt. And when that happens, you won't look back at the times love didn't work as wasted. You'll see them as tests that shaped your patience, sharpened your discernment, and strengthened your sense of self, so that when love finally arrived, you were able to meet it without shrinking, without begging, without losing who you became along the way.